Hey, welcome back to Slow Bells. Today I'm doing some video editing at the Port Marina in Midland, Ontario. Bob and I just finished up the Trent Severn Waterway yesterday. The last video was the portion of the Trent Severn Waterway from the beginning down in Trenton to Peterborough, where Tim and Janet got off and Bob joined me on the boat. So this video will be from Peterborough to the end of the Trent Severn, which ends at, I think it's Port Severn. Check it out.
I spent 3 nights in the Peterborough Marina. Tim and Janet headed back to Seattle, and my new shipmate Bob joined me from Atlanta. Bob and I eventually headed out on a beautiful but breezy Tuesday morning. We had a long wait at the first lock, but the long wait turned out to be my own fault and had everything to do with something called the blue line. Most locks on the Trent Severn Waterway have a blue paint mark on a portion of the cement bulkhead on either side of the lock. I wrongly assumed that this was a warning for boaters to not tie up there, but I was wrong. If you are ready to pass through the lock operator expects you to park your boat on the blue line. If you want to just hang out where you are for a few hours or overnight, the lock operator expects you to park somewhere other than the blue line. On that Tuesday morning, I did not tie up slow bells on the blue line, so the lock operator assumed I was not ready to pass through the lock. Live and learn. The second lock Bob and I passed through on that Tuesday morning was a lift lock. There are 2 of these lift locks on the Trent Severn Waterway, and their operation is quite a bit different from a conventional lock. Have you ever seen one of these at a car repair shop? A big hydraulic piston lifts the car up so the repair guy can easily work on the bottom of the car. Hey, wouldn't it be cool if the hydraulic piston lifted a swimming pool instead of a car? And also, it would be even more cool if there were boats floating in the swimming pool while the whole thing was being lifted up or down. As crazy as this sounds, that is exactly what happens at each of the 2 different lift lock locations on the Trent Severn Waterway. Each of these locks actually has a matching pair of swimming pools that you can pull your boat into. One swimming pool handles the boats going in one direction, and the other swimming pool handles the boats going in the opposite direction. As one swimming pool is going up with its load of boats, the adjacent swimming pool is coming down with its load of boats. Here's how this works from the boater's perspective. Let's say you're locking up. You would pull your boat into the lower swimming pool. As you pull in, you pass over a locked door that is submerged underwater beneath you. Once inside, they raise this underwater door so it seals off the swimming pool. Then a huge piston lifts the swimming pool and your boat up to a higher level. Now the door at the other end of the swimming pool drops down into the water and you drive your boat out of the swimming pool. As I mentioned before, there are a pair of these swimming pools at each of the 2 lift lock locations. While one is going up, the other is coming down. The engineers who designed these locks were kind of sneaky, and they designed it in such a way that the higher swimming pool has an extra foot of water depth as compared to the lower swimming pool. This extra weight of water makes the higher swimming pool heavier, so it is pulled down by gravity. Underneath each of the 2 huge pistons that support the swimming pools is a closed-loop water reservoir. As gravity forces that heavier upper swimming pool down, This water inside the reservoir pushes up on the lighter swimming pool. Pretty clever, don't you think? Although these locks are a little intimidating to enter because of the great difference in height between the upper and lower levels, they are the easiest locks to use on the Trent Severn Waterway. Once they close the locked doors behind you, there is no swirling water to worry about. That's because there is no need to flood water into the lock or drain water out of the lock. Your boat just floats in your quiet little swimming pool, as the entire swimming pool is either raised or lowered to the new water level on the other side of the lock. Easy peasy. We had a little excitement when we tried to pass through this area. The image on the left is what I was seeing on my Navionics display. The image on the right was what I was seeing on my Garmin chart plotter. The dotted line on the chart plotter shows where the boat actually went. It is interesting to note that neither display shows the small island here, where green marker 227 is mounted on the little island. If you stay in the channel, you have to pass between two very rocky islands in a very narrow channel. Initially, my Navionics charts gave a strong preference to passing through here, north of the marked channel, where the water was indicated to be deeper. But when I got here, a fisherman and a lady on her lake house porch were both yelling at us to stop and use the marked channel instead. I paused long enough to question the fisherman about the area I almost went through, telling him that my Navionics charts indicated a uniform 10 feet of depth. He said there were probably some areas in there that were 10 feet deep, but there were other areas in there that were 1 foot deep. The lesson I learned was when the Garmin and the Navionics and the channel markers are all giving you different information, trust the channel markers. Typically, we would tie up for the night at a lock. Since I had already paid in advance for this privilege, it seemed a little silly not to take advantage of my investment. But we did spend one night at anchor in a lake between the towns of Buckhorn and Fenelon Falls. We went for a swim that afternoon in the lake, and it became obvious pretty quickly that I needed a better swim ladder. The evening gave us a nice sunset, and the morning gave us all the ingredients we needed for lakeweed salad. Yum, yum. The town of Bobcaygeon seemed to be a mecca for the houseboat rental fleet. They were everywhere. Apparently, some of these rental houseboat drivers don't have a very stellar reputation for their helmsmanship, but we never had any problems with them. There are some areas of the Trent Severn Waterway that are uncomfortably narrow and shallow. My shallow water alarm was going off on a regular basis in these areas. It was a little like going through the dismal swamp canal again, except here the sides of the canal were rock, not mud. I spoke to the skipper of a 55-foot Fleming yacht with a 5-foot draft. He said he had plowed through mud at least once, and he said he had also nicked a rock once. Here are some shots I took as Bob and I passed through the second lift lock on the Trent Severn Waterway. It was at this location that we witnessed the Great Sheep Rescue Operation. It's a long story. As you travel on the Trent Severn Waterway, you will pass through Lake Simcoe. This lake is 15 miles long from top to bottom, although we only had to travel about a 12-mile section. This lake is big enough that you probably don't want to mess with it on a windy day. At the north end of Lake Simcoe, we stopped at the Port of Aurelia Marina for a few days to buy groceries, do laundry, and eat way too much ice cream. The lake water in this area was unusually clear. The marina was an exceptionally nice one. It was here that our friends from Nellie May put their little red tugboat back on its trailer and headed home to South Dakota. One boat in the marina was finishing its Great Loop adventure near here. Although many boaters start their loop adventure in Florida and head north in the spring, a Great Lakes boater would start their loop adventure sometime in the summer and head south. Finishing the loop is often referred to as crossing your wake. After making generous subsidies to the local ice cream establishment, we headed out once again. The Trent Severn Waterway is a very popular area, and lots of people from Toronto have lake homes here. One lake home even had a caboose that acted as a guest house. Very cool. We spent a couple nights at anchor in Sparrow Lake. I whacked my head on the mast, and Bob scraped his arm while on anchor duty. When we weren't busy bleeding, we sanded teak and watched the water skiers zoom past our boat. There are a lot of trains in Canada and a lot of railroad crossings, but this is probably the strangest train in Canada. It's the Big Chute Marine Railway near the west end of the Trent Severn Waterway. They use this railway instead of a lock to get boats past a big drop in the waterway's water level. Not only is this a strange-looking train, but when it gets to the end of the line, the engineer runs the train right into the lake. Boats are floated onto the train, then held in place with straps. The train then climbs out of the upper lake, goes across a highway, down a steep hillside, and ends up in the lower lake, where the boats can then float off and resume their journey under their own power. The train is pulled along by 4 huge cables. If you look closely, you can see that the train has 2 rails on each side. If there was just 1 rail on each side, like a conventional train, the train would tilt down at a dangerous angle as it went down the steep hill. It isn't hard to imagine that if this were the case, the cargo might end up beating the train to the bottom of the hill. Someone probably figured out that this would not be very good for business in the long run. However, with 2 rails on each side, you can make 1 rail lower than the other rail. In this way, the train stays pretty much level throughout its entire journey. Bob and I also noticed it was not uncommon to let the back of a large boat hang over the end of the train. I assume this is to keep the boat's propellers well clear of the train's floor. The muscle power to move the train is provided by these huge winches located in a building adjacent to the Marine Railway. This is a picture of the original Big Chute Marine Railway, but as pleasure boat traffic increased on the Trent Severn Waterway, it became clear that they needed a train that was capable of hauling several boats at one time. If you're in a hurry, there's a much faster way to reach the lower lake level, but for some reason, I didn't see a single boat take advantage of it. Here's what it looked like as Slow Bells took her ride on the Big Chute Marine Railway. Roughly an hour after leaving the Big Chute Marine Railway behind, we passed through one more lock and thus completed our trip along the beautiful Trent Severn Waterway.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. I really enjoyed the Trent Severn Waterway. For me, so far, it's been the highlight of the loop trip. We'll see what lies ahead. From here, we're going to sneak along the north shore of Lake Huron, passing first through Georgian Bay and then into the North Channel, all on the long road to Chicago. Later.